Now is the turn of Michel Simard. Michel is an assistant director in one of the methodology divisions of Statistics Canada. Her subdivision is responsible for the methodology of the labor force survey, as well as all income and expense type surveys for the household survey programs. Since 2011, she manages the Disclosure Control Resource Center and the teams that address and resolve methodological issues related to confidentiality and disclosure control methods. She has led the methodological development of a number of tools allowing more access to data, including the real-time remote access and the GTAF, two automatic systems that produce confidentialized tabular outputs. She also manages the research agenda, which includes topics such as synthetic files and big data linked files. She is involved with the modernization projects of Statistics Canada, including the modernization of access. Michelle, please.
Well, thank you for the introduction. First, want also to thank the organizer, Ricardo, for the invitation, Natalia, for the great day on Monday. Also want to raise my hat that I don't have to the translator. You are doing a very good job, and I apologize in advance if I change a bit the script. So thank you. So today I'll have to think about that. I'll attempt to give you a flavor of the modernization of Statistics Canada, and the big data and the digital period has pushed us to modernize ourselves. So the first part of the presentation will be describing the modernization and especially the modernization pillars. Access is one of the key part of the modernization, so I'll introduce the vision we have. The framework that we'll be using, and nicely Felix Ricci presented it yesterday, so I won't pass too much time on it, but it's based on the 5 safes. And then introducing the 2 new initiatives we have, which are the Virtual Data Lab, or VDL, and this new tool we have developed to classify sensitivity and risk, called the confidentiality classification tool. Data and the digital economy, as you learned yesterday, are rapidly driving innovation and creating benefits across Canada and the world. Business, government, citizens are subject to an explosion in big data and rapid advances in data analysis tools and technology. Department and agency generate and use vast amount of data, including tax returns, social program data, immigration flows, weather information, or geospatial data, to just name a few. And we still also have access to some transactional and smart meter data. And we have a big inventory of data that we still have to make sense of it. So yet the supply of good data cannot meet all the demand. And worst, sometimes it leads to making critical decisions based on low quality data. And as national statistic officers, we have to ensure that we have the trust and confidence of citizens in how the data is used and foremost protected. So national statistic officers, we have to ensure that we have the trust and confidence of citizens in how the data is used, but foremost protected. So Canada's commitment to open government is founded on a strong history of transparency and accountability, first established within our enactment of the Access to Information Act in 1983. In 2012, the government joined the Open Government Partnership, and in 2013, we endorsed the G8 Charter of Open Data. So Canada has taken significant steps to ensure more open data and more open information inventories are available. But while supporting greater openness of information to make full use of all the data assets, we also have to ensure privacy of individual and confidentiality of our data. So we have legislation in place that protects the privacy rights of Canadians. So we have the Privacy Act and the PIPEDA, so the Personal Information Protection and Electronic Documents Act. But on top of that, StatCan also is governed by the Statistics Act that protects the information collected by the agency. and even public information that we have collected under the Stat Act, we need to protect it when we release it. And we will continue to use this unique expertise and proven statistical methods, protocols, systems to maximize the quantity and the quality of the data that we will be making accessible to users while managing the risk of disclosure. And that's the key part of this talk. It's the managing the risk of disclosure. So StatCan is one of the largest contributors of the data file and is a leader in protecting data and information. And this modernization, big data, digital stage will not change in the future. Needless to say that we need and we have the legal framework to support the modernization of access. Having a lot of data does not mean automatically that you have a lot of information. So we have to make sense of all these rich data sets to transform them into relevant statistical information. And to do so, we need to improve how we generate, use, share, and disseminate data, capitalizing on the expertise of a renewed and modernized StatCan. And this has been repeated by our chief statistician. Even though we're going into new area, we need to make sure we rely on our rigor in our method and our rigor in our analysis. Statistical literacy becomes more and more crucial in the digital era. And statistical agencies have to take a leadership role in building statistical capacity. And this is one of our pillars of modernization. So this is the 5 pillars of modernization, and those are the expected outcome for each of them. So now I'll just go through them quickly. The first one, those pillars were introduced in the summer of 2017 and are driving all the modernization agenda of the agency. The first one, and again, Felix mentioned it yesterday, it's user-centric. So the user is at the core of every change we are making in the organization. So we want to produce statistical information in a timely fashion. We want to ensure that our users have the information they need when they need it. The second one is the leading edge method and data integration. We now have access to a plethora of new data sources, and we need to rely less on surveys. We need to figure out how to produce reliable statistics and information with those new data sources. We will develop or use alternative methods such as machine learning algorithm, AI, data integration technique. We're also experimenting a lot with those. And way more, we have to rely way more on data modeling. It's a very exciting time right now, and to be a methodologist is StatCan, as there's a lot of interesting challenge. And one of them is to develop this new inferential framework with the new data source. So we're getting away from traditional survey sampling, but we're not going into non-probability sample. Statistical capacity building. So we want to provide leadership as a data steward for the whole government. We want to improve statistical capacity by sharing our expertise in collecting and processing data, but also in analyzing and using the data. Increasing statistical literacy is one of the key important roles that we will have in the modernization. The final one is sharing and collaboration. And this is about raising the presence and the visibility of Statistic Canada and StatCan data. So we want to provide seamless access to our partners and stakeholders. And this means removing as much as possible the barriers to access data to some of our well-trusted partners. Finally, the fifth one is part of the talent, developing the talent required to conduct such initiative. I think it's David yesterday who talked about the pyramid of the talent. This is what we call our unicorn breed. So the data scientists, so the mix between methodologists, IT, and analysis. The other dimension of this pillar is the flexible workplace. So the access is not only for users, but it's for employee. We want at one point, in 2-3 years, the employee can actually work at home. So that's also part of the modernization agenda. So this is a very quick introduction, and if you want more information, you can talk to me. Now if I relate those pillars to the topics at hand, which is the access. User-centric, what it means, that we will improve and expand the mode of access. will increase the access to data and microdata, so more detail and more microdata file will be accessible. The other key that we have to think about is being able to discover the data, so the metadata discoverability. So we need to think about that. As we put the data out there, the researcher has to figure out what is actually available on the file. And this is important to remember that we need also to protect that metadata. There's information in that metadata. For the leading edge method, we want to embrace new methods, at least for us, and evaluate synthetic data file for business data, noise introduction, scientific use file for social program, make more economic data available, and we will be using a new modern, for us again, IT infrastructure. We want to go into the cloud. And we also want to allow some virtual accreditation of user. For the statistical capacity building, and that's important for the methodologist, we want to develop training material and tools for users so they understand the intricacy of confidentiality issue, the risk, the quality, and the limitation of the various forms of statistical information that we will be releasing to them. And all this we'll try to leverage on some of our special partnership. I want to be clear, we're not opening data to everybody at the same time and they have access to everything. It's going to be a very gradual plan, and we'll start with our trusted partners first. We have developed what we call the Access Trust Framework, and this will be the next slides. So we think we have a perfect ecosystem that will allow ourselves to be great and successful in this modernization. So we have our legal framework, which include policies and directives that are backing and supporting this transformation. We encourage and welcome any new way of thinking, any new project, and any new tools that we can come up with. We want to focus on being enablers rather than limiters. So we're shifting our focus on access, trust, risk assessment, risk sharing, and accreditation level. And our first big initiative involved the IT infrastructure, which is the virtual data lab. So the end state should look like that. So analysts with no legs, obviously. And they will have access through the cloud infrastructure. And note that our regular standard tabular output will still be accessible. We still have our daily, our CANSIM table. So whatever we have presently, we still have, but we're just expanding the access. So we're still going to have some physical protected enclaves for some of our highly sensitive data holdings, but we will introduce new virtual enclave to some accredited users, to some data holdings. So you can see I'm starting to put some nuance there now. We are creating categories of data, category of physical location, category of sensitivity, and category of users. So how do we decide which file, which mode, which users? Well, let's first talk about the 5 safe. So we have an introduction of this. So we're building our approach on using potentially 5 different safeguard or 5 different mitigation strategy. So safe people, safe project, safe data, safe output, and safe setting. So those for us are the buffet that we can pick, and we can decide which one we want to apply to have a best protection as possible. We don't need to have all 5 safeguard full steam on every product. We want to be kind of holistic, global in our approach. So for example, public use file should appear. We have put a safeguard on safe data and safe output. But we have put nothing on safe people, safe setting. The file is used by anybody. As opposed, we have, that's my animation there, the research data center, which is on the other side of the 5 safe. So for the research data center, we have put a lot of strength on the safe people. They have to be accredited. They are deemed employees. A lot on the safe project because we need to evaluate the project, and also on the safe setting because it's a physical enclave. But we have put nothing on the data. It's not safe data. It's not safe data. So that's the approach we want to do. Be flexible in which safeguard that we will be using. So in our vision, we want to create a continuum of access from a very public, unsupervised, self-serving tools. And on the other side, you have the highly secure setting in a very physical, accredited environment. So I want you to look at the bar in the bottom. So, and that's the gradient of the sensitivity of data. So this gradient of the scale will help us position the data or the product in where we're going to make the file or the product available. So this scale is important. So it's from less sensitive to sensitive data, and depending where you are in the score, this is where we'll say, okay, this product can go on the public or can have to be in a secure environment. I'll provide more example. So this scaling or this category, we wanted to develop some kind of a score approach. And this was also driven by our early feasibility study of when we're playing with the idea of the cloud. We realized pretty quickly that having two states, because right now we have two categories, sensitive data and non-sensitive data. There's no nuance, that's it. And that means that if you want to have a viable solution on the cloud, you have to put all the locks and the safeguard of the IT for the sensitive information, and the cost was just exponential. So we realized pretty quickly, I don't think we need to protect all the data with the same kind of level of protection. And this is how the idea of this scaling or the classification of confidential information started. In our early discussion, we also realized that depending on who you're talking about, the sensitivity was different. It was not a consistent. For the same product, a director would say, yeah, I think it's sensitive. Another one would say, no, I don't think it's sensitive. So it was also this relative concept of sensitivity. So I'm not sure we have the perfect tools, but at least we think it will provide a consistent classification of confidential information, and which will remove as much as possible the subjectivity of classifying what do you think it's sensitive or not. So this is where we have developed the confidentiality classification tool, which is the next new initiative that I will introduce. So what is the CCT? It's a short, sample, self-administered questionnaire for which you don't have to be a confidential expert. You actually only need to know the data, which usually most managers do. It assigns a score based on response to various questions, and it evaluates two dimensions of a file of a product. First, the disclosure risk, so basically the risk of re-identification, and it used the four well-known types, so identity, attribute, inferential, and residual, because we think each one has some kind of impact. And the second aspect or dimension that we measure is the sensitivity. And this is based on the intensity of the impact a breach could have on the individual business, institution, or government that has provided the data. Then we combine the two scores and we finalize a classification level to that product. And I'll go in more detail in each of the scoring. So for the risk assessment evaluation, we use the four types of disclosure risk, and each of them is evaluated based on three possible ratings: low, medium, and high risk. If you require significant effort, so you need to be a PhD in math, have a mega computer, you know algorithmic math, do reverse engineering, you know statistical disclosure method, that means that it's considered low risk. Yeah, you need significant effort to be able to re-identify a unit. As opposed, if there's little effort, it's a census file, you have a date of birth and a postal code, this is considered high risk. There's no much effort required to be able to identify an individual. And each of the rating get a score to reflect the risk, and higher the score, higher the risk. And they are different degree depending of the disclosure type. So for identity disclosure, we have for low, medium, and high, we could have 1, 3, 8. And for inferential disclosure, it could be 1, 3, and 4. So we're still playing with which is the score to assign. We're then going to sum the score, the four score, to get a total for the risk assessment. For the sensitivity, oops, I have to remember. For the sensitivity assessment, it's similar. We also have a rating index, but it's from 1 to 5, 5 again being higher risk. And it's based on the intensity a breach could have on the individual business, government institution providing the information. So we consider it's negligible if it doesn't cause any harm in terms of a breach. Severe, you cause severe harm to the business or an individual. This is the impact on the data provider. We assume the reputational harm of the organization is constant and it's high, whatever happened. A breach for the organization is bad. So it doesn't affect the score. It's constant and uniform for all the breach could have. We do have a user guide and expert in helping the manager assessing which should be the impact. And at the end, we combine the two scores. So on the horizontal axis, you have the disclosure risk, a final score from 0 to 10. Then you have on the vertical, the score for sensitivity from 1 to 5. You multiply both. And then we use a step function to derive the interval to assign a final level. So the end result, then you get your final classifications. For example, for a score of between 15 and 20, you would get a level 5. And that means, for us, we're going to map it to what that means in terms of safeguard. So, potential mapping. Let's say you want to use mobile workplace. So you have on your left hand side the level assigned. So your final level from 1 to 9. 1 being non-sensitive information. So that means that you can actually work from public place anywhere and probably has a file at no identifier, low sensitivity, low risk, and you can work anywhere almost if you want on the file. Then you have the second bucket, 3 to 4. That means that you can work also not necessarily in office, but a room with restricted public access, like an hotel room. You can actually work on a file, classify 3 and 4 in your hotel room. I don't know how they do it, but the IT guys can actually figure out where you're accessing the file, and I think it's through the IP that they actually control the access of the file. And again, to reassure everybody, if you classify as 9, let's say you have a raw collection file, definitely it's not getting out of StatCan, still work from the headquarters on regional office, and only a StatCan employee would have access to those files. Another example would be mapping, let's say, of business data. So we also do it with the type of file. So from 1 to 6, you can actually work on synthetic data file of business or public file on survey of X. And again, if you have if you classify as a 9, you have probably data with a direct identifier. And again, you have to work within StatCan offices and being a deemed employee. So the tool is in its final stage. We're still refining the score. We had road tested it. We have presented it to the senior management. We still think it's an agile development. We still want to refine some of them. But it has been accepted. We do have a corporate governance if you want to change your level. Actually, this is what we like about the tool, is that a manager, let's say you want to have the file accessed by more users and you want to have a score, let's say, lower. So you want, he has right now a product with an 8 and you want to get to a 5. We can actually figure which risk and what he needs to do to make sure that, oh, this file now can be accessible somewhere else. Other notables are research aspect, mostly on our tabular outputs. We are working on a random tabular adjustment. This will be presented at the PSD in September. Oh, September. End of September. We also have a scanning type of output for our tabular analytical output, analyzing some diagnostic tool for risk. We're definitely working on the synthetic microdata file for business data, and also entertaining very seriously the scientific use microdata file, so customized to some of our users. So needless to say, we are in a very exciting time currently. We're just starting a consultation with our stakeholder, and we have developed a 3-year plan for our VDL approach. We know we have an ambitious agenda, but I think we will be better positioned for the digital age. So, gracias, merci, thank you.